yeah, we went, and then I explained the whole thing to him. And that was another one of those weird moments where it's like, it could all just be coincidence, but it felt like a heavy moment,
Did you ask him why it was 111 for him?
He just said that he had chosen that. I mean, he had been in various, he was an OTO member, right?
Okay.
And was involved in a few other groups. I've always thought that he did it because of the whole Aleph thing. I didn't ask him after that. I was honestly in shock at that moment.
Right.
But I assume it had some type of occult undertones. But he was adamant, because I was like, "Did you just create this? Is this a new thing?" And he was adamant that he had it for more than 15 years. And you look on Reddit, I checked it out, and he really had been on there forever and had been using Mr. 111. So stuff like that. It just things like this was crazy too, dude. Right? I was upstairs recording part of the show when I was working on the production of season 1, and again, Hellier referenced that this woman that contacted them, who has the same name as my wife, right? So she is in the penitentiary here in Somerset, PCC, Pulaski Correctional, or Pulaski Communicator, or anyway, it's the correctional facility. I forget what the acronym is, but so she's there. She's locked up. Or PCDC, that's what it is. The detention center, Pulaski County Detention Center, and so she was in there. And even in Hellier, when they talk to her, she's in jail, right? And I was upstairs. I was working on production, first season. I came downstairs from my studio into the bar, and it was empty except for this one guy. And I sat down with him. I knew him. He's a local attorney, like a young attorney that had been stationed here to work with the county attorney's office, right? It was kind of like a government position. He was going to move on in a year to somewhere else. And we were sitting there, and I was talking to him, and he was like, "What are you doing?" I told him, I was upstairs, producing this podcast. And I told him a little bit about it. He's like, "Well, what's it about?" And so I mentioned this Amy character, right, that had contacted them and said her last name. And he was like, "Oh, I represented her in that case." Right? And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Yeah, I was her attorney." And I tell him some more of this stuff. Of course, he was like, "Well, I wish I'd known all this. I could have gotten her off on a, on maybe some delusional stuff, but I was, we were just talking about it, and he just said, "Yeah, I'd represented her." So the whole time that we're talking, the bar, and this is like a Tuesday night, so it's always dead, unless it's the weekend. And so slowly the bar is filling up with all of these people, and I'm looking around like, what is going on? So he and I are talking about it, and he says, "I think they look like they're correctional officers." I'm like, "Do you know some of them?" He said, "No, but they've just got the build. It just looks like that." So finally I walked up to somebody, and I was like, what's going on tonight? What's happening? And they were like, "This is the PCDC Christmas party." And so we were having the conversation about her in prison, that he had represented her. I was upstairs working on the show, on part of it about her. And then as we're talking, the actual people from that correctional facility come into the bar and have their Christmas party. Right? And again, it's like little things, not little things, big things even, but things like that just, it feels, there's a playfulness to it, right? But there's also a weird, not danger. There's almost, it's playfully sinister,
There's, what is the saying? If you hear a new word, you're likely to hear that word again, numerous times within the next few days.
Oh, really? Is that a thing?
Yeah, I'm just looking it up. So it says science knows why. You know how when you learn a new word, you see it everywhere? Science knows why. Let's see what science thinks it knows here. Comes down to your brain playing tricks on you. I figured that's what they were going to say. The Baader-Meinhof Phenomenon is actually a term for frequency illusion, a type of cognitive bias that your mind creates. To understand this, you need to know a little bit about cognitive bias as a whole.
I guess it's true. It's like when you buy a new car, when you buy a particular model of that, particular car.
You're going to notice.
Yeah, then you start to see that car everywhere on the road,
But there are also times where you hear a new word that's really archaic or weird, that is not a common word by any means.
Yes.
And then it pops up. And then you're going, okay, that's odd.
Yeah. See, to me, those are the feedback loops, right? That's the second order cybernetic quality of all of this.
Yeah.
And, the stuff that the synchronicities of like the lady having the same name as my wife, or, the being in the bar when all of that stuff sort of synced up. Those things I think are, those are way less common,
Yes.
in terms, I guess that's the thing too about all of this. It's just it's only weird. I mean, it's weird in general, but it's particularly weird to me because of the personal connection to it.
And
I guess that's what it's been, that's what Pennyroyal has been, is me trying to understand some of this and like why it functions this way. Because I don't think that it's I don't think that there's like a archdemon thing that is observing all of the pieces on the table and orchestrating things, right? It's way more, I don't know, like a more general kind of interaction. I don't know. It's just that's what's so fun about exploring this, and also what's so frustrating is that it's so hard to categorize, and it's hard to find. When I talk to Dan Dutton about this a lot, he frequently says, we have to invent. There's no language that exists to talk about this, and in many ways, we have to invent that language and to even understand the phenomena. Because right now we really don't have a great way of describing it or being able to communicate it to each other.
Yeah, very true. Something I was the personal aspect. I mean, a lot of this paranormal stuff, not just synchronicities, but so much of it has a very personal effect. And so, when people say, well, why don't UFOs land on the White House lawn? It's like the list of reasons why is pretty long, but the most obvious one is it's not about, the government. It's not about the society as a mass. It's a very personal experience when people have these experiences. It means something to them. It goes back to Jeffrey Kripal's thing about this stuff happens for a reason.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the power in this is that, right? The personal nature of it is what makes it, I think, so powerful.
And it's very dreamlike at times too. That's the other thing. So it's because it's a symbolic language, and the dream language is also a symbolic language. Some of this high strangeness stuff comes across like something you'd experience in a dream. Man,
I had this really, really. It didn't make it into the show. I ended up cutting it out. It's available as part of the extended audio, like on our Patreon. But there was a story I tell about. I had a discussion with Wren Collier about dreaming, right, mm-hmm. and lucid dreaming, because he's done a lot of research and done a lot of lucid dreaming himself. And we were just talking about dream time and things. And I had this really weird sort of, I don't want to say spiritual experience, but weird moment where I'd had this reoccurring dream for years where I was in the dream, I'm approaching this, it's a vast green plain, right? And it's like scrubland, kind of. And it's not really grassy, but, it's kind of it's wide and flat. And there's this mound, this single mound that comes up out of the earth. And so I'm walking toward it. And as I get closer to it, there's this shack that's just sitting here in this sort of like desert scrub area. And it's corrugated tin, shack. And so I go inside, and it's like a little bar, and there are all these people waiting, and I'm watching, and then on the horizon toward this mound are these two really weathered folding lawn chairs, right? They're like camping chairs. And there was this discussion that whenever anyone here, these people are waiting to move on to the unknown, it was that they would go and they would sit in those chairs. But once you left the shack and sat in the chairs, you couldn't come back. You could stay in those chairs as long as you wanted, right? But you couldn't come back. But when you were ready, they would just walk on. They would get up out of the chair, walk toward the mound, and then walk around the edge of the mound, and then they would never come back, right? It was that they were venturing into the unknown. And I had this dream reoccurring hundreds of times, right? And in my 20s. And I was like, man, what in the world? This is the strangest thing. And I wasn't, I was researching a lot of stuff, but I wasn't this heavily into the esoteric research. But I'd always thought, man, that is such a crazy dream. And so while I was working on Pennyroyal, I was researching dream lines, right? And as roads, right? And these Aboriginal sort of dreaming roads.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And so I was looking at that. And then I open up this article, and there it is, man. This mound, right? It was exactly what I'd seen in the dream. This mound rising up out of this like desert-like flatness, this scrub area. And it was in Australia, and it was Ayers Rock. It was Uluru, okay? This thing called Uluru. And it's one of the spiritual centers of the Aboriginal cultures in Australia. And I'm reading it, and it says, this is the intersection point of all of the dream lines and all of the dreaming, and that all dreamers at one point in their life must come through Uluru. Huh. Okay? And so then I was like, is that what this was? And since then, it was such a weird moment of seeing the image, an image of something I didn't think existed, that was only something that could exist in a dream. Yeah. And then to see that it existed in real life, but also to see that it was connected to dreaming. Yeah. Which just blew me away, And so that was another one of those, like, it's not so much a synchronicity but it was a weirdly spiritual moment, to see that.
That's freaking awesome, honestly.
So I've wanted to talk. I'm dying to talk to someone in Australia about. I couldn't fit that in. I ended up cutting that out of the second season just for time. But like I said, I've got the extended audio that has that. It's like a 18-minute story about that. But that to me was a really special experience. And again, it's like it all feels like a journey, and it all feels like being on a road of some sort, because that's a dream I had when I was 20 years old, and through my 20s, I'm 42 now, right? And so it's like 20 years ago, was this stuff all set in motion? Was I ultimately, I was only researching that because of my research into Pennyroyal and to occult roads. So it's like without Pennyroyal, I may have never discovered that.
And there have been a number of things in my life that feel like they've been set up since early in my life.
Yeah.
Precognitive dreams, things like that, other weird connections that make sense now, but like they could not have been random events.
Yeah.
Also, your dream sort of connects. It's sort of the ending of Lost.
It's been forever since I've seen Lost. Is that? When they're like, are they in a church? Are they in a church?
It's like a church type of thing, but it's the same concept that they're in, and I'm pretty sure it was inspired by the Seth material to some degree. But they're in this other universe, which is kind of like where they're dealing with everything and waiting, and then finally, that when they're ready, they can move on.
Yeah.
And a lot of people hated it, but I looked at it and went, that was awesome, because I understood what they were trying to say with it.
Yeah. I loved Lost. I thought it was great. Definitely the ending, I remember at the time was controversial. That's another one of those shows I need to go back and watch, because I tuned into that every week. It was and friends would come over and watch it.
Oh, yeah.
Sort of like a great communal thing that I don't think exists as much anymore because of streaming.
Yeah.
But I'll have to see the Seth material.